Strength training is the safest form of exercise that you can do. Now, there's a big caveat with that, and that is when it's done properly. When done properly, strength training is extremely safe. And the reason why I say this, and most people are going to be like, no, it's not, you get injured all the time. Again, when done properly, 99% of people don't exercise properly. They don't strength train properly. And so I'm going to go through all of the things that you want to look at if you're going to actually strength train properly. And I have a lot of experience in this because I've lived in gyms my whole life, and I'm a personal trainer. I've been doing that for 16 years, and I've done a lot of the things that I'm going to say you shouldn't do. So I've learned through experience myself. I know what they teach in all of the different programs. I've got certifications from different organizations. I have a degree in kinesiology. So please hear me out. But I want what's best for you, and I want what's best for me, which is safe, effective programming for getting the results that you want. Now, what's one of the, I'm just going to go through a bunch of different things, but one of them is just having a controlled environment, meaning you want to be as stable as possible whenever you're going to perform any of these weight lifts, okay? If I'm lifting a weight and I'm having to balance on something, there's a chance, there's risk of injury because I might fall. If there's someone next to me, all right, and that I'm using heavy weights and I'm moving, okay, they might fall into me, they might have a stroke and then collapse on top of me, okay? So you want to try to have as controlled environment as you can. If you're in a gym, that's hard, but you want to try to control that as much as you can, making sure that you have enough space around you, making sure that you have your own apparatus, whatever it is that you're using. So controlled environment. And that might be, controlling it to the point of where you're seated instead of standing. If I'm doing something standing, I have more variables that go into it. Whatever we're focused on, we want to focus on the target muscle group that we're working. We don't want to also include this balance challenge, which again was part of these functional fitness trends and things like that only add to risk, and they don't add to any reward. People think that they're getting this reward, but they just don't understand how you should train the body, which is you want to attack the muscle that you're going after instead of training a bunch of muscles at the same time, mediocrely, right? In the middle, right? You want to try to train them maximally. And to do that, one muscle group might be stronger than another. So you don't want to do that and just get mediocre results with all of the muscles. You want maximum results with each of those muscle groups. And we know that. We've got all these different exercises for these things. And it's not that many. You don't have to do that many to get that maximal output out of the muscles. So that's number 2 or whatever. Okay, moderate weights. Why do we want to use moderate weights? Well, you can use heavy weights. It's just going to be a little bit more challenging to move them with good technique. You can use lighter weights. It's just going to take you a lot longer to get to failure. But at the end of the day, you can use whatever weight that you want. But the reason why I would say use moderate weight is because we want to use a slow repetition cadence. And if we use a super heavy weight, the weight's probably going to move slow anyways. But again, you have that peak force thing, okay? So force equals mass times acceleration. So if you increase the mass, you're going to increase the force. If you increase the acceleration, the speed of things, which we're going to get to, that increases the force as well. We want to try to keep peak forces low. So when you're exercising, if you can try to, again, keep everything slow and keep the mass moderate, it's got to be time efficient, all right? You can't be in the gym all day. So if you use too light of a weight, you're going to be doing an exercise for 15 minutes and that's not effective. But if it's too heavy, then again, you get into these technique things and you get into the way that you're moving the weight and the risk that goes with the form. So if my form goes and I have a really heavy weight, that's when I can get injured. So you want to use moderate weight, something that you can control with a slow rep cadence. So that's the next thing, being slow. What do I mean by slow? Someone commented on this and it was a great question. He's like, what do you mean by slow? I read a study and it said the slow repetition was 1 second up, 1 second down. For a lot of people, that's slow. They're just pushing or pulling, doesn't matter with the movement, but they're 1, 2. That's pretty controlled, like you'd think. And I used to think that. And I learned in textbook that's actually a slower cadence versus explosive powering it up. I say 3 seconds is the least amount of time that you want to spend on the eccentric and on the concentric. 3 seconds down with a pause, change of direction slow, and then come back up for 3. You can go all the way to 10 seconds. 10 seconds. People do 30 seconds down. I think you get extreme. I like 3 to 5 seconds, sometimes even a little bit more. That feels good to me. I feel like I can really get into the muscle. I enjoy that. But you don't even have to move. You can do isometric exercises where you're just holding and you're just pushing up against a stationary object, okay? A machine, you can set it to a certain position and you can just push up against it. And you can do different exercises. There's tons of different protocols with isometrics. But if you're going slow when you are doing repetitions, that's going to help, again, minimize those peak forces. And especially when you get down to the end ranges, you want to pause. You don't want to change direction quickly. That's the most important thing. That's what's going to make that peak force jump. So you come down for 3 to 5, you pause, and then you come back up. When you get to the top, you don't want to lock out. This gets me into my next point. Avoid extreme ranges of motion. You don't want to be getting the full stretch, because that's when you're going to be putting more of that stress on the ligament and the tendon versus keeping things in the muscle. You can go to whatever range of motion is comfortable with you, but if you go to those extreme ranges, that's when you're at more risk for injury. So if you can shorten up your range of motion a little bit, or at least make sure that when your form can stay the same in that full range. If it starts to change, let's just give an example of like a press. If I come down and I start to do this, where my elbow starts to move and my shoulder starts to move to get that full range of motion come into my chest, that's not what we want. We want to keep that good positioning of the shoulder here. If I can do that here, if I can do that here, great. Whatever your range of motion is, that's where we want to keep it. You don't want to exceed and go into these extreme ranges if you don't have the mobility or the ability to be able to do that. So that's that. Slow, we talked about that. Pause on the change of direction. Change of direction is so important. Avoiding lockout. Okay, so that's another thing. We want to keep the stress in the muscle. This is going to make the exercise more effective, number one, but it's also going to avoid that extreme range of motion where instead of the joints holding it in position, the muscles holding in position. So if I lock out my legs on a leg press, I'm going to be not doing any mechanical work with my muscles. It's going to be used my joint, all right, basically, and my bones are going to be holding me in that position, and I'm not going to be doing any work. So you're going to be basically getting rest, but also, again, when you go from no tension to tension, that's going to increase the peak force as well. So you want to try to keep tension in the muscle the whole time, and again, keep that slow cadence with slow transitions from positive to negative, concentric and eccentric. Use a spotter, okay? If you are doing a technical lift, like a squat, like a bench press, like any dumbbell or barbell exercise, even on a machine, if you can use a spotter, if you can use a trainer, this is a shameless plug for myself, is as a personal trainer, you want to understand your technique on things. That's paramount. I mean, that should have been number one I talk about. But with these things, again, this isn't in order specifically, but if you don't know what you're doing, then it's going to make it harder. But just having someone there can help you, especially give you feedback of, hey, you are changing that range of motion. You are changing the exercise by maneuvering your body differently. We want to have the same form on rep 1 as same on rep 10, or however repetitions that you're doing for that set. When you reach that failure point where you can't do a repetition with proper technique, you don't want to then try to do a rep with bad technique just to get the repetition finished. You want to focus on why you're there, which is to stress the muscle. So having a spotter helps. Obviously, if you're going to be doing a technical lift with a heavy enough weight, you want to make sure that you have that. But on top of that, if that spotter also understands how to take you through the range of motion with good technique and remind you of the checkpoints that you need, and also push you to get into that state of momentary muscle failure where you're not able to perform the exercise with good technique, maybe they can take you past that concentric failure, you're always stronger on the negative on the way down, lowering phase of the weight. If I can then have someone help me on the way up, then I can control and lower that weight on my own. Pause, push. I'm trying to push it up. I can't get it up. They help me. Okay, I'm pushing. I'm keeping my form because they're reminding me. That's what a trainer's supposed to do to really push you and get the most results out of each set that you're doing. Let's see. Use machines. Most people, I used to think in the past, I used to think that machines were inferior because of the functional fitness craze where you had to use your stabilizers. Well, it's all nonsense in a sense because muscles can act as stabilizers or prime movers. So it doesn't matter what you're doing. If you target that muscle and you fatigue it, you are going to build the strength in that muscle, whether it's in a stabilizing position or whether it's in a prime moving position to move, right? If you work that muscle, you're going to work it. That's what we want to do. We want to, again, take it to momentary muscular failure. Well, if I'm training my shoulders, let's just say, but I'm also doing it on one leg and one arm, and I'm balancing, I'm working the stabilizers of my obliques and my foot muscles and things like that at the same time. Isn't that great? Well, why wouldn't you, again, use a safer way of doing things? Because that's a dangerous way, like we just talked about. It's not as controlled of an environment. But on top of that, isn't there a more effective way to train my obliques? Isn't there a more effective way to train my foot or my leg if I'm doing that single leg balance? Isn't there a more effective way? Yes, there is. We know what these methods are. Find a safer, more controlled way that you can actually exhaust that muscle group, and then jack up the weight and do your shoulder press on a seated position or do it on a machine so that you can, again, maximally push here. How much more can I get out of my shoulders when I do something in a controlled position versus something that's unstable? I'm not going to be able to lift as much weight standing on one leg or standing on top of a Bosu ball, pressing it like so, versus being seated or stationary or in a much more controlled environment. So again, with better technique, with less risk, and you're going to have more output to get that deeper level of fatigue, which is the whole purpose of you being there in the first place. You want to try to get through all the muscle fibers, the slow twitch, the intermediate, and the fast twitch fibers, and that's by going to failure. We can do that safely by doing things slowly, like I said, 3 to 5 to even 10 seconds on the concentric and eccentric phases with pauses at the end ranges so that when you change direction, you're not bouncing or jerking or popping the weight up. You're pausing and then you're moving slowly back up. So those are that. What's my last one? No ego lifting. So this is another thing that you have to think about. You got to check your ego at the door. And this was very tough for me to do. Very tough for me to do because I'm a personal trainer, I'm fit, I'm strong, I want to jack up as much weight as possible. And what would end up happening? I would take things through too much range of motion to try to balance it up, to try to use momentum because I knew I couldn't pause and then just push it back up. I wanted to lift more than what I knew I could control. So the reps go, the form goes, all of these things go, all the stuff that I talked about, those things end up going because my goal in my head was to lift as much weight because I had to look a certain way because of my ego. But in reality, what do I really want when I get to the gym? I want my strength and my physique gains. That's really what I'm there for. I'm not there to check off that I lifted 225 pounds for a bench press. That's not why I'm there. That might be another secondary goal, and that might be your goal. You might be a power lifter, but that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about safe, effective ways of building muscle, building strength for life, for general fitness, for physique, for whatever it might be, but not specifically at a specific, like powerlifting, not a specific goal of actually lifting the weight. It's a general fitness thing. It's a health thing. So with that being said, you got to put your ego at the door. When you check in, you got to go, look, even if I'm using 5-pound dumbbells, if I can fatigue the muscle group that I want to fatigue by using that muscle, that's what I got to do. And I don't know about the ladies out there, but for men, this is very, very tough. I struggle with my clients. They say, I really want, but once they see it, once they understand that they can get the same effectiveness out of it, and again, they lower all these risks. For me, that's what it's all about. As a personal trainer, I have an obligation to lower the risk of any of these exercises. On the scale of healthcare providers, At the top is physicians and doctors, right? Well, I'm down at the bottom. I'm just a lowly personal trainer. Although I have a degree and I have certifications, I'm still at the bottom of that scale, all right? And what do all healthcare providers have to take? We have to take the Hippocratic Oath, and one of those oaths is do no harm. And if what I see in the fitness industry is sad, because these things aren't my opinion on things. You might think, JD, oh, you're just telling us your opinion on stuff. Well, this is just physics. This is just stuff that I've learned. I've seen it. I've seen people get injured in the gym. I've injured myself. That's the last place that you want to get injured. I read the comments and people talk about, oh, well, strength training is really dangerous. Yeah, if you do it like an idiot. And trust me, I was right there doing CrossFit workouts and doing all these things and doing ballistic stuff. And hey, it can be fun and it can be engaging but for me, I don't look at strength training as fun. I look at it like brushing your teeth. Okay, you want to make it effective to do it. You want to make it to get the result. Who cares if it's fun? Who cares if it looks great for Instagram? It has to be effective and safe. And if you're paying me money to be your personal trainer, I have to take that in consideration. So when I see all this nonsense that I used to do, I go, hey, to each their own. But at the end of the day, if we're going to sit down and talk about effectiveness and we're going to talk about safety, this is not my opinion. It's simple physics and physiology. So that being said, that's why strength training is very safe. You start the motion yourself, you complete the motion yourself. If you have a controlled environment, if you take these things into consideration, like going slow and using moderate weights, you're going to be able to get the target that you want if you're using proper technique safely, effectively, and it's going to work for you. If you don't know what these things are, I would say use Jay Vincent. He's the guy who's got all these programs. He's my number one go-to. Drew Bay is another one. He's I think maybe mentored Jay, but for whatever reason, I really use Jay. I think his programs and things like that are awesome. Jay Vincent, I'll link to his stuff and his YouTube. That's the person, if you want to design a program, go after that. I don't have any programs for you. I just talk a lot of shit on here on my channel. I like to have fun. I like to talk about lots of different things. Recently, we've been talking about cardio and it's been a lot of fun, but now we're talking about strength training and why it's effective. But that's how you strength train and make it safe.